Okay, man. All right, what up, YouTube? It's your boy Vest to Vest. I'm back at it again, and today I'm still in California, LA to be exact. And today I'm here with one of my boys, John Friedman, man. John, how you been, bro?
Good, bro. Good, bro. It's great to be here with you doing this interview. It's awesome. Yeah.
Fantastic, yo. And I know it's been a minute since we graduated, from Case. What you been up to, since Case?
Yeah, for sure. So right after Case, I did a 1-year Master of Finance over at UC San Diego.
Okay.
And after that, worked for a few years in consulting and ended up, deciding I wanted to get my MBA. I never thought I was going to do that, but decided to pursue it and just wrapped up 2 years over at UCLA Business School over at Anderson, and just started in investment banking here in LA.
My goodness, yo, from all the stuff that I've heard about investment banking, man, I heard you guys are like plowing money, man. You feel me? So, is that true? What's going on with that, man?
Yeah, bro. There's a lot of different areas within investment banking, but what I'm focused on is mergers and acquisitions.
Okay.
And so an investment banker's function within M&A is kind of like being a real estate agent, except instead of selling and buying homes, you're helping to sell and buy companies. So that's the basics of what it is.
Interesting. Are a lot of lawyers involved with, because I would imagine, with mergers and acquisition, there would be a bunch of lawyers, maybe in the meetings deciding, hey, this is what to do, not to do, and all that. Are you in those meetings?
Yeah, there's a lot of lawyers involved in the process for sure.
Okay.
On both sides, on both what we call the buy side and sell side. So buy side is the side that's actually buying a company. Sell side's the company that's getting sold, and the bankers that are representing the selling company.
Okay.
And there's lawyers on both sides. There's a lot of diligence involved in the process. So what we call quality of earnings. So you have accounting firms come in to go through the books of the company that's getting sold. And kind of validate, how quality their revenues and everything is, how quality their reporting is.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's a big part of it.
I see. So what got you interested in investment banking? Because I know. So what did you study at Case, by the way?
I studied economics.
Economics?
Yeah, economics and finance.
Okay.
And I knew I wanted to get my Master of Finance. I just wanted to get more exposure to finance in general.
Yeah.
Economics is more on the theory side. Finance is getting closer to application.
Okay.
And so I knew I wanted to do that. I knew I wanted to come to Southern California. And so, I kind of first heard about investment banking and kind of learned a little bit about what it is through my brother-in-law.
Yeah.
When I was at Case, he also graduated from Case and is 3 years older. So I kind of got exposed to it from him, and then just down the line, once I got to business school and realized it was an opportunity, made the decision that I wanted to do investment banking instead of consulting.
I see. So, you mentioned that you did your MBA. Was the MBA like a major requirement to become an investment banker?
No, it's not. For me, I wouldn't have been able to do it without the MBA. But if you get into investment banking right out of college, you can do that. So you go out of college, they hire analysts. And, if you can do that, then you're in.
Okay.
But if you've already been working for 3 years or so, 4 years, and you didn't do investment banking, you're probably not going to be able to make it in. So a lot of people, what they do is they get their MBA, and then they go in as an associate.
As an associate, okay.
Yeah. So for me, it wasn't going to be feasible to break into the industry, most likely.
Oh, I see.
At that point, without the MBA, but it's not a requirement.
Oh, I see. I see. Because most people that I know getting MBAs are trying to become managers at companies, and I see. So with the whole investment banking, I guess one of the things that I also wanted to know is, what's the because you get to jobs and maybe promotions, and there are all sorts of bureaucracies involved and all that. So you probably haven't been there long enough to know this, but what is the I'm not sure what the term is, the opportunity to move up, get promoted and all that. How is that? What's the feasibility like in the company that you're working for today?
Yeah, for sure. So It's very, it's similar to consulting in the sense that it's very structured in terms of the levels and the amount of time that you stay in each level. So the different levels in investment banking, you have analyst, associate, vice president, director, and managing director. So those are the different progressions that you go through. Depending on the level, but each level in general lasts about 3 years.
3 years,
roughly. And, they decide if you're ready for the next level, but you're not going to stay stagnant in a level for 5 years. You'd just be fired at that point. So it is a very kind of strict progression. Some people go a little faster, some a little slower, but in general, it's about 3 years each level.
And also the other thing is, at least when I hear about investment banking, all the people that I know doing investment banking tend to be located on the eastern coast, like New York,
NYC.
Right. So what is that landscape looking like now? Because you are doing investment banking, but you're not in New York. You're here in LA. So how is the job market here beginning to proliferate?
Yeah, 100%. So obviously the epicenter for investment banking in the U.S. is New York, New York City, but you still have a lot of activity across the U.S. You have investment banks in probably most major cities in the U.S. And the reason for that is because you have companies that are getting bought and sold everywhere, all across the U.S. So you could think of an investment bank as kind of a service firm, right? We're providing a service to companies that either want to buy or sell. This is mergers and acquisitions, by the way, but you have different branches within M&A. It's just mergers and acquisitions, kind of the bread and butter.
I see.
And so, there's definitely, the major banks have branches here. Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, they all have offices here in LA, or most of them do. New York City obviously is the kind of center of it, but you still have offices in different major cities.
I see. And then also, when I think about mergers and acquisition, are the banks the ones actually acquiring these companies, or is it maybe a company to company, but the bank has to sort of intercede or kind of be the middleman? What's going on there?
Yeah, absolutely. So investment banks aren't the ones actually buying and for themselves. An example would be, the simplest example is, let's say Amazon wants to buy a small tech company. There's going to be an investment bank representing Amazon, and there's going to be an investment bank representing the company that they're buying.
I see.
And so the investment banks are just generating a fee basically on that transaction. So if the transaction is for 100 million, the investment banks on both sides will get a fee of that transaction size, and that's negotiated between the buying party and the investment bank, the selling party and their investment bank.
Interesting.
So it's a fee-based business, and in some cases, so you'll hear like the big banks will say they have a balance sheet, which means they can support certain areas of the transaction. That gets more into the weeds. But the general idea is, if you kind of understand how a real estate agent works and makes money, is very similar. It's just you're doing that with companies instead of real estate.
Interesting. Also, how broad is the M&A sector? Because I would imagine that there would be M&A specializing in perhaps tech. And then there could be pharmaceutical and all the other companies that you may. So how broad is that, and to your knowledge?
It covers everything. And typically the way it works is you have industry groups. So investment bankers in those industry groups will specialize in that industry, in that vertical. So let's say you'll have a TMT team, or you have a tech investment banker team, and they do the same thing that, let's say, the chemicals team does, but just in the tech industry instead of the chemicals industry. So you have all those different groups, and that's generally how it works. You also have those are industry groups. You also have product groups. Product groups are groups that specialize in a certain niche. So like the M&A group will do will support M&A across the industry groups. So they'll do all of the modeling and everything for the industry groups, and they work across the industry groups.
Okay.
So you have industry groups and you have product groups, but yeah, in terms of how broad M&A is, it covers every industry.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see. I guess the other question I was trying to ask is, within, say, so you work in the, mergers and acquisition. Do you have to specialize in a specific, field? Say, John specializes only in tech or only in pharmaceutical companies. I mean, is that the case?
You don't. It depends on how the company is set up, how the investment bank is set up.
Okay.
Some investment banks, you'll be a generalist, but typically, as you move up, you're specializing. And most investment banks have it set up to where you're going into a specific industry group, even when you're early on in the career progression. So the answer is no, you don't have to specialize, but that's typically how the bank set it up, is you're an investment banker within this vertical. And as you progress up, the reason for that is because, like you said, you brought up the middleman, right?
Yeah.
As you become, a director and managing director, you're the middleman between all these buyers and sellers. You're connecting buyers and sellers. So you're at that point, the job is sales, and you're getting to know your specific vertical very, very well, and all of the players involved in that vertical.
Right.
And so you kind of become an expert in that one field. But if you're a generalist, it becomes harder to do that.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. And then you mentioned, I think early on, that you had to get your MBA to break into the field. So in that sense, then, for your MBA program, did you focus solely on mergers and acquisition and investment banking, sort of, like a focus?
So you could do a focus. I did a little bit of everything.
Okay.
Most MBA programs, you'll be able to kind of pick and choose what you want. It's usually pretty broad. Since I already had the Master of Finance, I didn't take as many finance classes as some other people, but the curriculum is very broad, and also in the MBA, grades matter a little bit less than in undergrad or or regular grad programs. But studied a little bit of everything.
I see. I see. So, I mean, where are you originally from? I always assumed that you were from Texas.
Yeah.
Are you from Texas?
Yeah, I'm originally born and raised in Houston. And when I was one, my father worked in the oil industry for BP his whole career. And so when I was one, we moved to Cairo, Egypt for 8 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yo, I never knew this, man. This is actually interesting, man. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So, we moved there, and I have, obviously I was young, but I have a lot of memories of being over there.
Yeah.
And, great place to be. And I haven't been back since, but then we came back to Houston.
Yeah.
And I was there, through high school and through college. I don't have family there anymore, but Texas is a great place.
I see, man. I mean, all the Texas people I know tend to be incredibly, strong-willed people, very focused people as well. Hot-headed sometimes, man. I'm not sure if it's the heat, man, but they tend to be hot-headed at times, man. But yeah, you mentioned you wanted to be on the West Coast, even while you were studying it, because you knew you wanted to be on the West Coast. I mean, what was the main impetus, and why did you want to be in the West Coast?
Yeah, for sure. So my younger sister, she did her undergrad over at Chapman University in Orange County.
Okay.
And so I visited her a few times over the years when I was at Case. And really liked the area. I hadn't really visited LA, Orange County until she went there, and every time I came, I was like, oh, this is the place for me. I love the beach. I love good weather.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to try it out.
Okay.
So that's what brought me to San Diego. And when I was in San Diego, I didn't want to leave. It was like a little paradise.
Really?
But I'm glad that I actually made the move to Orange County and LA. It's funny because San Diego is like, from San Diego to Orange County to LA, it's like San Diego is the most laid back, Orange County the next most, and then LA everyone thinks is super intense.
Yeah.
And I thought I wasn't gonna like LA, but I've been here now for a little over 2 years, and I love it. I love the variety. I love, like right now we're in Marina Del Rey. It's completely different than if you go. I was just driving through Inglewood, completely different area. So that's what I love about LA is, all the variety that it offers, how big it is, and I really enjoy it here.
Interesting. And I know when you, I'm not sure if when you graduated, immediately after you graduated, but you guys went on a trip where, you took Fred along, along that trip. How did that trip come about, man, and where did you guys go?
Yeah, so that came about, so that was after my first year of the MBA, so it was the break between the first and second year.
Okay.
That was last September, and one of my good friends in the MBA program, him and I knew we wanted to do some traveling together, and so we planned it out, and we both had a lot of similar interests in terms of where we wanted to go.
Okay.
And so we drew up the plan, and we both wanted to go to Singapore, we both wanted to go to Bali, and we both wanted to go to Kuala Lumpur, and Dubai was also like a go for both of us as well. So we planned it out, those 4 locations, and it was an amazing trip, man. It was, I hadn't been to Asia before, so I definitely wanted to visit Asia.
Okay.
And I was also curious about the Middle East as well. And so, we were able to do that trip 3 days in each spot, 2 weeks total, and it was a great time.
Man, that seemed like a great trip, man.
Yeah.
I mean, do you recall any of the places? I mean, does anything stand out to you? I mean, if I were to ask you, of the places that you guys visited, which one stood out to you the most?
Yeah, so I guess from two angles. One, I would say the coolest thing that we did from a nature standpoint was snorkeling over in Bali. There's some beautiful snorkeling there. We snorkeled, saw some beautiful coral reefs, swam with the manta rays. That was a great day. We did a whole day of that. So from a nature standpoint, I thought that was really cool. From just a general city standpoint, the biggest surprise was probably Kuala Lumpur. I was pleasantly surprised. City with a lot of mix of different cultures, very vibrant city. Asia's completely different than here. People are out and about at midnight on a weekday, and families too, not just people partying, but the cities are very lively, at least Kuala Lumpur. So that was a pleasant surprise. I really enjoyed Kuala Lumpur. This is a place I would probably, all of these places I would probably go back.
Okay.
I would say, the reason for wanting to visit Dubai and Singapore is because I kind of viewed those as some of the most advanced cities, easy places to visit, safe, expensive, but if you look at Middle East and Asia, those are the 2, I think, most advanced cities. And so those were just great to visit. Small countries, but very interesting.
I see. What about the food, man? Because I'm a foodie. I cook.
Oh yeah, me too.
Yeah, I cook, and Fred and I, we appreciate good food, right?
Yeah. Me too.
So what about you, man? Of the 4 places that you guys went to, man, like what were the food differences, and which ones did you like, and maybe, speak on that.
Yeah, for sure. I'm a big foodie as well. I like all kinds of food. I really enjoy Asian food, dim sum. Okay. We got a lot of that during the trip when we were over in Asia. I would say the one thing that probably stuck out, we got some, and I don't remember the name of this crab, but there's this specific crab over in Asia. I don't know where else they have it in the world, but it's this giant crab.
Really?
And they have a restaurant in Singapore that's pretty famous. We got it with one of my buddies from the MBA. He had a friend in Singapore who knew where to take us. And this crab was amazing. Like, I'm not a big crab guy. I'll eat anything, but this crab was just really good. If you just look up like giant crab dish Singapore, you'd probably find it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that dish was something else. It was great. That was probably the one that stuck out the most.
Wow. So when you're talking about giant, man, like the biggest crab I've probably seen is about this big, man. Like,
no,
how
the shell is like, it's like
oh
this.
Oh my goodness.
It's like this, yeah.
Now you gotta pop it with some sort of hammer, man.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right, so speaking of traveling, man, like, are there any other places that you have on your bucket list in terms of, going at some point?
Yeah. From Fred and I, while we're talking about this, I haven't been to Central or South America, so that would definitely be, I'm part Guatemalan, so I wanted one day to go to Guatemala.
You say you're part? Guatemalan.
Yeah, I'm part Guatemalan, so
Oh,
one day I want to.
Yo, I'm learning so much stuff. Man, I feel like this was so necessary, man.
Yeah.
Wow, yeah, speak on that, man.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy because, I feel like obviously we've known each other for years and so we're super comfortable. It's like when you have that with someone, you don't necessarily have conversations drilling deep into their past. You're just like, oh, that's Sylvester, that's John. Like, we know what's up.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
We know what time it is. But yeah, part Guatemalan, and but I can't speak Spanish.
That was gonna be my next question.
Yeah,
man.
I'm only. It's just my grandfather's Guatemalan, so my mom's half Guatemalan.
Oh, I see. I see.
But so I do want to visit there, but other places, just Eastern Europe in general.
Okay.
Hungary, Croatia. I also want to visit a few other spots in Asia, Philippines, Thailand. But yeah, Eastern Europe and Central South America will probably be on the list.
I see. Yeah, I mean, those are places that I've had on my bucket list as well. Specifically Colombia, man. I've heard out of the people who have went there, man, they've attested, man, to me that Colombia, if you want to go to a place that, it's like nightlife is great, man, Colombia, man, you might want to, pay attention and be a little careful, man. But, for a guy who loves women as much as I do, man, Colombia is the place for me. But then you also mentioned from a conversation we had, I think maybe this weekend, that you were maybe not recently, but you were in Cape Town.
Yes, yeah. I went to South Africa in 2019 with some high school friends, and that was amazing. I mean, one of the most beautiful cities I've been to. And we were talking about this because you've been, and just an amazing place. I really enjoy it. I mean, there's so much to do there, from nature to nightlife to everything, and so Cape Town's a great place. One of the things that we did that will always stick out is we did great white shark cage diving, which sounds pretty intense, but it's not. You're kind of just chilling in the water, waiting for the sharks to come. But it was a fun experience, and we also hiked up. What is it? Table Mountain. Table Mountain.
Yeah.
We hiked up there, and I was there for about a week. But man, that's a place I would go back to.
Really?
Yeah.
Man,
that's a place I would go back to.
Was it what you expected? Because I think a lot of people go to Africa, with this anticipation, maybe not even anticipation, but misconception that the infrastructure in Africa is maybe way back, like maybe in the 1800s if you compare it to the U.S. right?
Yeah.
But then you go to South Africa and it's almost shocking, how developed in terms of infrastructure their country is. I mean, was that same for you as well? If so, could you speak on that?
No, that's a great point, and it's funny you bring it up because when I came back to Houston from Egypt after being there for 8 years, I mean, granted I was very young, but a lot of people, even older people too, I think, would ask, oh, did you ride a camel to school? Like, because they just didn't know. They just didn't, I mean, we were kids, but I think even, some teenagers or young adults probably have that misconception as well.
Yes,
that there just isn't infrastructure. And I think one thing that a lot of people don't appreciate is just how big and diverse Africa is.
Yes.
And so, just like any other area of the world, you have that variety, you have that diversity. And, I'll say South Africa, I mean, it is developed. It's, it was a pleasant surprise.
Yeah.
It was definitely a pleasant surprise. And, growing up in Cairo, I guess I got exposure to some of that. So I was there. I saw what it was and could compare it mentally to a city in the U.S.
I see.
So, and I think to that point, like, Africa's underrated in terms of a tourist destination.
Yes.
A lot of people want to go to Western Europe, and that's why, I've been to Western Europe is an amazing place, but, I've been to a lot of those countries already. And so for me, I'm curious about visiting other areas of the world. Africa, I've been to Kenya, Tanzania, Egypt, South Africa. There would definitely be a few other countries that I want to visit, but I'd have to do some more digging.
More research,
But Africa's Africa's an amazing place.
I know,
It really
man.
is,
I
yeah.
mean, it's interesting because you've been in more African countries than I have, man, and I'm African. So I mean, think about that, man.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that, I mean, compared to your average African, you've probably been in more countries than most Africans, themselves.
Really?
Because of the bureaucracy involved with obtaining visas, to go from, say, Ghana to South Africa or Nigeria. I can't even explain to you how intense and how difficult it is to obtain a visa to travel from one African country to the other.
Jeez.
But hopefully, in time those issues, get
Yeah.
addressed.
Yeah.
So how long did you stay in South Africa, by the way?
It was a little over a week, I want to say. It was about a week.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was enough time to, we had an Airbnb kind of by the downtown area of Cape Town.
Mm-hmm.
We also stayed in Stellenbosch, I think, for a night or two.
Okay.
It's like an hour or so outside of Cape Town, kind of college town. We didn't go up to over by Kruger or the other major city.
Joburg.
Joburg.
Okay. And Durban.
Yeah. But yeah, man, I mean, some of the most beautiful beaches and just scenery that I've seen, honestly, over in that area of the world is just a great place. I mean, Egypt would be on my list too, just because I spent a lot of time there and I haven't been back since I was a kid. So it would be kind of a crazy thing for me to go back and see some of those old places that I remember. But yeah, man, I mean, what's on your list for Africa?
What's on my list? Yeah, I'm traveling to South Africa in February of next year. The other places on my list will be Israel. I've always, had this idea of, traveling to Israel and seeing some of the, because I'm of a Christian faith, right? So, I've read in the Bible lengthy, stories about Jesus and some of the places, he frequented. So I want to go there, I want to go to I think it was the Calvary, and all these other places, historic places. I want to actually be there to see it, to feel it, all that. And then Asia also. For some reason, Japanese culture, has always been so beautiful to me, the samurai way of life. That disciplined nature, man. I feel like the whole educational system is a journey of self-discovery, right? And the way you actually master that is through discipline, right? I mean, in college you have to do your homework, you got to go to lectures if you want to do well. So I mean, it all merges or at least converge with this idea of discipline, what the samurais also cherish. So Japan is also on my list. I lived in Italy for 2 years, but I feel like I was so young that I don't recall much. So if I get the chance, Italy would also be on my bucket list, and then Germany. So let me see. So Germany, and then some African countries as well. Like you said. So Egypt, I really want to go see the pyramids. Yeah. And what else? And then I heard that Namibia, very next to South Africa, is also a very developed country that I also want to go check. So those are the ones in my immediate like travel list. So we'll see what happened with that. Man. Now I wanted to really branch off and talk about investments, right? And even before we talk about investment, maybe we talk about blockchains and Bitcoin and all that stuff for a bit. Because I know I used to watch your YouTube videos about, I think one of them you were comparing Bitcoin to gold. Yeah. And that one really stood out to me. I think it was one of your first videos. So yeah, I want to hear, how you came into Bitcoin or blockchain technology, and are you still investing? And if so, what are you investing in? Perhaps, or what are your maybe? Well, let's keep it for now. Let's keep it at this level for now. I'll ask more questions about it. But yeah, how did you come into Bitcoin and blockchain and all that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think everyone, It's funny, I remember back in 2017 when I just started working, it was right before the Bitcoin bubble, it was running up. Everyone was talking about it. And so at that point, I didn't really know too much about it. I mean, we all wish we would have invested back in, 2010.
Yes. Man, oh man, don't even remind me, man.
But, I think as I learn more about it, for me, the way I look at it is I'm more of like a traditional finance guy. The way I look at it is the potential, whatever you invest in is the potential to get future cash flows out of it. So with blockchain, I view it as technology. I don't view it as currency. Okay. That doesn't mean that there isn't a lot of upside, because the way I look at it is it's a platform. So if you're investing in Bitcoin, what you're betting on is that as a platform, it's going to draw a lot of users, and those users are going to get some value out of it.
Yes.
And typically, I think with blockchain, that comes out of transaction fees. And so the way I look at any blockchain platform is, if you're investing in it, you're betting on, you know, more users coming in. You're betting on the advancement of the technology on that platform, and for that platform to generate more transactions, more transaction fees, and as a holder of that, you're going to collect some of those
value,
of those fees. So for traditional finance guys, that would be, that's like collecting a dividend on whatever it is. I think where the big divide between like crypto guys and regular finance investing people is that you know, some people think that it's a currency or like a replacement for currency, and the traditional guys will say no, it's not. And I think if some of that was reframed in people's head, there would be more like alignment. Because really what it is, in my opinion, is tech. There's one that I got interested in, which is Hedera Hashgraph, and they're doing a lot of cool things with companies, you know, improving their systems, and I think there's a lot of potential there. So that's the way I view it. But you know, everyone has a different opinion. That's just the way I view it. And I think, you know, in terms of investments, I'm kind of, you know, I haven't been working for 2 years, so I gotta restart some of those. But you know, areas I'm interested in, I'm interested in precious metals. I'm interested in different cryptos as things come up. I see, but that's the one that stuck out to me is Hedera. And you know, from a stock standpoint, it's always, I think it's, you got to look at where we are macroeconomically and pick and choose what sectors you think are going to do well. I think that's the way to look at it. But
I see.
Yeah.
I see. So crypto as an investment, like you said, you look at it as a technology. Other people look at it as some sort of currency that's going to replace the U.S. dollar, right? And then recently too, I think the U.S. government is coming out with its own sort of blockchain technology. I think they call it a CBDC or something like that, right? Do you think that, well, maybe this is more opinionated, because now the government is releasing its own blockchain. Do you think it'll have the same sort of backing or maybe even usage as Bitcoin is? I think one of the reasons why people love Bitcoin so much is because it's decentralized, right? People, I mean, I wouldn't say vast majority, but you know, there's a growing people, or you know, a number of people who are tethered to Bitcoin because it's sort of separate from the U.S. government. Because they've lost trust to some extent in the government, in the dollar. They've seen over the course of the years inflation, you know, like take its part in the U.S. dollar. And if the U.S. were to create their own blockchain, this issue, I'm not sure if they would be able to alleviate or even, you know, avoid that issue entirely, right? So how do you think, you know, people would react to the U.S.'s own currency if they were to drop a blockchain?
I mean, there's a lot to talk about there. I mean, you framed it up really well. CBDCs, I think, are terrible. And it's just a whole nother level of surveillance and control that they could impose on people. So it could start with, hey, we're just doing a CBDC and it's great because look, it's so fast. Like it's so fast, and you're connected directly to your finances. Everyone's on it. It's great. You know, that's how they would probably pitch it, is maybe even things like, oh, you don't even have to file your taxes anymore. I don't know. Things like that to make it seem great. But really what it is a way for them to implement more surveillance and control, because it's all there on their blockchain. And, so they can, you know, and central banks have done this in the past, so it's not really a conspiracy theory. I mean, if you look at like window guidance in Japan back in the 1980s. The central bank kind of diverts funds to sectors that they want to grow.
Okay.
And so that's one of the reasons why there was a huge real estate bubble in the late 1980s in Japan. If you look at the Nikkei index, which is the main stock index in Japan, there was a crash at the end of the 1980s. That index didn't recover until about, I think, like 2015. So it took 25 years to recover because the central bank in Japan, they boosted up real estate prices in this one section of Tokyo so much. It was that this one little section was worth more than all the real estate in California.
Oh my goodness.
That's the central bank made that bubble over there. And so, you know, central banks operate in similar ways around the world, and I think a central bank digital currency overall is just not a good thing. And that's why you need alternatives like Bitcoin, like gold, for citizens to be able to have some sovereignty over that, in my opinion.
Okay.
And you know, I think that's where the currency conversation comes into play with Bitcoin. Is hey, we need to have something that's separate from government, and I think that's great. If people want to use Bitcoin, that's great. They should use it. The potential that I see in it is different from a currency, and because, you know, you mentioned Christian faith, I think that God's money is gold. I believe that gold is God's money, and that cannot be replaced with any other creation.
I see.
And so from that standpoint, gold is already there, established. Things like Bitcoin could be used for certain different things. You could put blockchain on top of gold. You could use that blockchain to do transactions separate, and that's great.
Okay.
But this is why in the end, and this is why I could get some hate or get called old school, is because I think gold is God's money, and that can't be replaced with anything. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but that's just the headline note.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, do you say that primarily because gold is limited?
Bitcoin was created kind of with gold in mind.
Right.
And gold, there's so many properties of it that it just makes it a completely unique substance. It doesn't go away. So if you have a gold ring from 5,000 years ago, and it doesn't corrode, the properties are still the same. It can get melted down, destroyed. If you have a bunch of gold bars, you can melt them down and recreate them into something else. So it's one of the, I think it's the only metal that can have that ability, where it's not corroding. Yeah, the supply is limited. And I think one of the misconceptions now especially is that, oh, it's just jewelry. It's used in all kinds of applications. It would be used a lot more in electronics. It's used in electronics and aerospace, even for medical purposes, but it's so expensive that it's used sparingly. Okay. But it's arguably one of the, if not the most useful metals in the world. Okay. It's just very expensive, so they don't use it a lot in applications. But it is, you know, it does have that utility. Okay. You know, if you just look, you don't have to take my word for it. Just look at central banks. So if you look up what's on central banks' balance sheets, central banks hold a bunch of gold. Central bankers are some of the biggest holders, and that's because it's the only asset that's no one else's liability. So once you have the gold, it's yours. No one, like, you just have it, right? If you think about like a savings account with a bank, if the bank goes bust, you could lose your savings. That's when people rely on the government to bail out the bank. Right. If you just have gold sitting in a safe somewhere, the only way you lose it is if someone steals it from you. Yeah. And because it has that utility that can be used for different applications, there's always value. Right. And that's where you hear people talking about the low price for Bitcoin or any crypto is the mining cost, right? Yeah. And if you apply that same thing to gold, it's like there's always going to be someone that needs it for whatever they're selling it for. Jewelry, if you need to use it in any sort of industrial application. So that's my general view on that.
I see. But a lot of the new generation, you know, who tend to be more interested in blockchain and Bitcoin and Ethereum in general, one of the arguments, you know, they talk about or mention is that, I mean, yes, gold is valuable, right? And there's also a limited it's a limited resource.
Yeah.
The problem with gold though is as useful as it is.
Yeah.
If you have gold, say you have $1 million worth of gold stored somewhere.
Yeah.
If you want to travel, if you want to say migrate from the U.S. to somewhere else,
Yes.
I mean, the transportation of that gold
Yes.
is incredibly tedious, right? And perhaps expensive as heck as well.
Yeah.
Right. So one of the arguments is that Bitcoin, as useful as it is, doesn't have these setbacks.
Yes.
That I just mentioned, right?
Yeah.
So how do you see that argument?
Yeah, I think that's completely true. I think, so this is where, so I would say, this is where you could put blockchain on top of the gold.
Okay.
So I mean, you can look this up. There's a company called Kinesis. They partnered with the Indonesian government to make Sharia compliant finances with gold. And so the whole point of that is you can build blockchain on top of gold.
Okay.
And a company or someone is holding that gold for you, right? And then, but this is where the discussion goes. Hey, you have to trust that party to hold your gold for you.
Exactly.
There's no third party trust involved with crypto. And so, yeah, that is true, and that would have to be something that I would just concede in the discussion. I would say in general, for me, it's a more minor point, because when you have money in a bank account, when you have money in a brokerage account, when you have money anywhere, you're trusting someone to hold that for you.
Right.
So just because you're holding your gold with Brinks or Atmex, it's in a vault somewhere, and I have to trust them, to me, that's a very minor point. Like, technically, yes, with Bitcoin, if you hold it in your own wallet, cold storage, it's no one else's. Like, you're holding it. Just like if you have gold in your closet, no one else is holding it for you. To me, it's a minor point because you have ways around it. I mean, you could put it like, you bring in a bunch of it. Like let's say you have a vault that's run by a company. Every year they have auditors, like a bunch of accountants coming in, checking it. Right. And they rotate the companies that they're doing. They're not using the same company. They're doing different companies, continuous auditing.
Right.
I mean, yes, there's a risk. I just don't think the risk is I just think it's overplayed, basically, is what I'm saying. So that's where, yes, it's true. If someone else is holding your gold for you, there's that third party liability. But there's a platform, One Gold. I used it. It's kind of a company under Atmex. You can invest in gold digitally and have a digital wallet of gold that's held in a vault. And when you request gold from it, they'll ship it to you.
Okay.
But the biggest problem right now I see with transacting in gold is taxes. This is all government imposed. It's the same thing with Bitcoin. If you're trying to, this is why, by the way, I don't think transacting in gold is very useful right now. Yeah. Because it's and same with Bitcoin, because it's a mess with your taxes. If all I'm doing is buying things in gold, I have to keep track of the taxes on that because the price is going up and down. It's a total volatile. And the platforms don't do your taxes for you. They don't create the tax form. So for me, transacting, even though I'm a big gold guy and I like crypto as well, I think transacting in both of them is a complete mess right now because you got to worry about the taxes. And so that's where the power of the taxing authority, the government, really comes into play, in my opinion.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. Well, I love some of the points that you made about trust being a minor point. That would also go counter to the whole blockchain theme, right? There's this idea of blockchain being trustless. We want to eliminate the middleman entirely, right? And then I think the whole reason why blockchains or even Bitcoin was created in the first place back in 2009 was that we've seen in history during the Great Depressions, the government calling all the gold. Back then the dollar was backed by gold. Yeah. And so we had trust in the government. And then in 1971, Nixon just takes away, I mean, so that trust, we've seen that trust severed. We've seen that trust, stumped upon by the very government who was meant to protect the people's interest.
Yes.
Right? And so that's one of the reasons why blockchain, I think in the future, because more and more people are becoming, I guess, fed up with the government, right?
Yeah,
They're
I
losing
agree with
trust
that.
in
I
the
agree with that
government.
completely.
Yeah. My next question, though, would be that how do you think blockchain achieves mass adoption?
I think it achieves mass adoption through being useful. This is where I view it as a platform.
Okay.
It's like, if you only view it as a currency, I don't think it's ever going to, because the government ultimately has the say. I mean,
Okay.
they basically stomped on gold. If they can do that to gold, they can do that to crypto as well. Even though it's third party, like if the government wanted to stop that, they could. They could just say anyone that transacts in Bitcoin goes to jail.
Right.
They could just make it illegal. So it's the same. It's really the same issue. It's just some points are a little bit different between gold and blockchain, in my opinion. Even because they could still monitor. If you look at who the inventor of the deep web was and all that, like they can track. And so I agree with all the points. I think it's just a kind of like a study in psychology, because if you look at the history of reserve currencies in the world, and for those that don't know what a reserve currency is, I mean, the US dollar is the current reserve currency, but it's the prevailing currency in the world at the time that you're in, that most transactions take place in.
Okay.
So some small countries might use the US dollar to transact because it's more stable than their currencies. And so when there's a prevailing currency that's dominating in the world, that's the reserve currency. Right now it's the US dollar. If you look at the history of those reserve currencies, it's with empires that are rising and falling. The US dollar wasn't always the reserve currency. Before that, it was the Great British Pound. Before that, I think Dutch had it, Spain. So different countries have had the status of reserve currency. They always blunder it away because of governments gone rampant.
Right.
So if you look at the history of that, it's a cycle that continues. And I think it's a cycle in human psychology and human nature of governments getting too much power, getting drunk on the power, and overspending. That's where the term debasing comes from. Debasing the currency of gold and infusing different metals in it, copper, and it devalues. So that's what happened. If you look at the history of old reserve currencies from different countries before the US took over, that's basically what governments did. Same thing as Nixon. They debased the currency, which at the time was gold. They start changing it from pure gold to infusing some copper, whatever, less valuable metal in it.
Yep.
And that reduces its value. So this isn't something that's just happening now. This is a story that's repeated over time.
I see.
And so I think really I think that's why the conversations like this are good, is because it makes everyone more aware of it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Regardless of whether you're anti-gold, anti-Bitcoin, pro either one of those, at least being aware of it, I think is useful, because maybe it'll prevent things like that from happening. But
happening again.
Yeah, it's a problem all around the world. It's not just the U.S. The European Central Bank printing too much money. Different countries have gone into hyperinflation because their central banks adopt this policy. And it's funny, I studied economics. It's all Keynesian economics being taught now. And, it's the idea that you can stimulate the economy by injecting money into it, which is, it's more complicated than that, but that's basically what these banks are doing, is they're creating money out of nothing, injecting it in, devaluing the currency.
Yes.
It's not really stimulating anything. It's just overspending.
Exactly. And creating inflation in the long term.
Right, exactly. And, so for all those points, and that's why one of my videos I talked about El Salvador and the president, going on Bitcoin. And I said I think it's a good thing, because at least it's progress towards something different.
Right.
And so even though I don't fully agree with that decision, I think it's a good step in the right direction.
I see. And I love the points that you made about, debasing of currency, and the history, even the brief history that you gave about, reserve currencies. and how almost all countries who have had reserve currencies in the past have somehow managed to blow it up, right?
Yeah.
I think we are in the very beginnings of the U.S. Messing up their reserve currency dominancy. One indicator of this is, I'm not sure how well aware you are about the BRICS summit.
Oh yeah.
Of Russia, India, South Africa, these countries, Brazil, coming together to create their own currency, right? Financial alliance.
Yeah.
And I think these countries and a lot of countries are actually applying to be a part of the BRICS financial alliance, right? Because they're fed up with the U.S.'s manipulation of the currency. They just keep printing, and printing, and all these other countries have to buy oil, in the U.S. dollar.
Yeah.
And so I think and it's interesting because other countries in the past, like Libya, who wanted to stand up, to this sort of manipulation. I mean, we all know what happened to them, right?
Yeah.
So Russia, being a superpower, and all these other countries coming together. You have China, Russia, and South Africa, Brazil, and the other countries who have also applied to be a part of it. I think we see the very beginnings, right, of a rebellion, right, against basically the U.S.'s dominance in the reserve currency. I mean, so how much do you know about that, and if so, could you speak a bit on that as well?
Yeah, those are some great points, and this is the beautiful thing about competition.
Yeah.
The U.S., I agree with you, is at this stage, is at an inflection point. This is where, so right now rates are high, and the central bank is going through like contractionary monetary policy.
Yeah.
There will come a time in the near future where the Federal Reserve is going to reverse that. They're going to print a bunch of money again, lower rates back down to zero. There's going to come a time, and when they do that, it's going to be, I think it's going to be, that's going to be the inflection point, is because we're already in this period of high inflation. People are becoming more aware of it, and the next time they do it, it's not going to work, and inflation is just going to run up. Okay. So if you study what happened in the 1970s in the U.S., this was after Nixon took gold off the dollar off the gold standard. It was a period of inflation.
Yep.
It was a period of inflation, and gold went through the roof. The value of the dollar just tanked, just went down. And I think we're kind of at another stage. We're entering into another stage of that.
Okay.
And so I think things like crypto and gold will do well. And I think, I had this conversation with a friend who's very well versed on, politics and how things work. He's from my business school program. He's Indian, and he told me the U.S. doesn't have allies. It just has, countries to do its bidding. And so
that's so true.
Yeah,
man.
and so the U.S. does function like a bully, and they'll do things. Whoever's in power is going to do things to other people to help them stay in power.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's happened over the year with the U.S. And I think a lot of Americans are unaware of the American privilege, is what I call it, which is just the standard of living that we get to enjoy. Yeah. And this occurs through us having the reserve currency privilege of being able to keep the value of our currency high while we overconsume. So that's where the trade deficit comes in. The U.S. is the largest debtor nation in the world, and basically what's happening at a simple level is every year we're sending, let's say every year we're sending to the world $100 billion worth of stuff, of exports. But every year the world's giving us $150 billion. So that's a $50 billion extra that we're getting, and we just write them IOUs saying we'll pay you back. Yes. But we never do.
Yo, that actually really, segues into my next question. Do you think the U.S. has any intention of paying off its debt?
No.
Because we've been piling this debt till God knows how far this is going to go.
There's no intention, and the reason is because if you just look at the breakdown of the budget of where the money's going, there's nowhere to cut. Even if you cut everything outside of Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, the military, like what's considered as like basically the necessary spending. If you cut out everything else, we'd still probably be in debt, or maybe even just at a balanced budget. That's how much they're spending on those programs.
Yeah.
And you'd have to cut out everything else. So there's no way they're not going to be able to collect enough taxes to cover it. And even if they did raise the taxes, this is where I think liberals and socialists go wrong, at least in the US, is they think that we need to raise the taxes on the rich. You could steal the whole S&P 500. The US government could steal all of Bill Gates' wealth, all of Jeff Bezos. They could steal all the billionaires' wealth, sell it all to pay down the debt, and we still be 20 trillion in debt, and it would still be going up. So there's no I don't think there's like any the only solution is to recognize that the government is operating the world's largest Ponzi scheme.
Yeah.
That's the only solution, and people will say, oh, you're heartless if you think taking away Social Security is a good thing. Social Security is a Ponzi scheme, which means that all the money that I'm paying taxes into it, I'm getting less out of it in the future.
Exactly.
And so if you're forcing people to put money into something that they're getting less value out of in the future, you're stealing wealth from them. But the argument is, well, for some people, for the very poor, it can be a benefit because they get more out of it. But ultimately, if you just think about how much people are paying in taxes, even poor people, when they're buying something, they're paying 7-8% taxes.
Yes.
Well, the companies that they're buying products from, those companies have to pay taxes, even if it's indirect, because their workers have to pay taxes on their income. Think about if you had no income tax. If you made $100,000 a year but paid no income tax, it would be as if you were making 150,000, because you have to pay taxes on that 140, 150,000, right?
Yes.
So the companies have to pay their workers more because their workers are paying income taxes. So that means that raises costs for companies. So this is it's all linked together. And I think that's what people don't recognize. They say you're heartless if you're going the other way. Well, just lower the taxes and stop spending so much, and maybe we'd be okay. But I think this is like an exercise. It's like a human psychology thing. It's anytime something goes wrong, the government blames the free market. They put in programs, they get more power, and it just keeps going. And that's where I think, this is my opinion, that's what's happened to the US. The US used to be a free place, and it's becoming to not a free place. The government has a lot of control and power to do things, and we'll see where things go. But
no, I'm actually glad that you brought up the income tax issue, man.
Yeah.
Because I've thought about it sometimes. I could be sitting there thinking, I'm like, it seems like we're being double and triple taxed.
Because quadruple that.
How the heck are you taxing me on income, and then when I go to the store to buy something that on the income that you've already taxed me on, I have to pay extra tax?
Yeah.
I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah, and then when you buy a house, you're paying property tax.
You don't really own a house because if you can't pay the property tax, even say you paid off the house completely, but later on down the line you couldn't pay your property tax, the government can still confiscate that house.
Oh yeah. And if you don't pay your taxes, what happens to you?
You go to jail.
Oh yeah. You go to jail big time. And so you can't I mean, it's just a very powerful system that they have in place. It's like my whole thing is, people will say, you need to increase the tax on the rich. Well, if people are so poor, why are they paying taxes? Why are they paying taxes, and why is the government putting money and raising it? It's a sleight of hand, really, is what it is, because government will say they're going to implement programs. Really what they're trying to do is just get votes, because they're overspending. So they're implementing all these programs, but it's not really accomplishing anything. It's raising prices. And if you really think about it, you have to ask yourself, do you think the government is better at spending money and producing value for society than companies that are in competition with one another?
Yeah, of course not.
Yeah, like you're in fierce competition to try to produce value and make money. And when the government short circuits that, it creates problems, and the only legal monopolies in the world are government monopolies.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so Yeah, man, it's a crazy topic, but
This, I mean,
the taxes.
Yes, this has been incredibly beneficial, man.
Yeah.
I think one last thing that I wanted to ask you, maybe not a couple, I got maybe 2 or 3 more questions for you. The first one would be that how much do you know about insider trading? Right, because I recently read or even watched a YouTube.
I'm listening. I'll just have to.
Yeah, recently watched a YouTube video where a guy was explaining some of the intricacies of insider trading, right? Mm-hmm. And it was interesting because insider trading applies to everyone else, but the people in government. Because these people get to sit in on hearings about what's going to happen with companies. And then as soon as they leave those meetings or hearings, they call their broker, hey, buy this much of this company for me, or sell this much, or short this company for me. Because I heard during the 2020 when we had the COVID and all that, Nancy Pelosi and her husband, made upwards of hundreds of millions. Because they got to, Nancy Pelosi got to sit in, hearings, from which she was able to give inside information. But she's not, she's not a CEO of any company. She's not a C-suite of any company. So those laws doesn't quite apply to those people. So how much do you know about insider trading and, that maybe background?
100%. I mean, everything that you said is completely true. And, I recently had to take my series exams to become an investment banker. Mm-hmm. And a lot of things within the finance world, you have to take FINRA series exams. Okay. FINRA is I don't know if it's directly a government entity, but basically the government has regulated these industries to where the individuals that are performing services need to pass their exams so that they understand the regulations that they imposed on the market, right? So I had to learn all about, there is some useful information in there, but a lot of it is just learning government regulation in the finance industry, and this links to the insider trading. Mm-hmm. And this is where it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? Because if you don't have the insider trading laws, the people will say, well, the rich guys that are doing the finances and whoever, and the CEOs and whatever, they'll be able to do insider trading. That's not fair. On the other side, you create the law, but then government officials take advantage of it. Exactly. And they're the only ones that are allowed to do insider trading, and they do. And there's been journal article, Nancy Pelosi is the big name that people talk about. There's many other cases, and there have been, articles and investigations into this. The Federal Reserve had employees that were fired for doing insider trading, and so it does happen, and government officials are protected from it. Corruption does exist, and I think if there were no insider trading laws, like zero, if it was just the Wild West, it would be better. Why? Because if insider trading was completely legal, information would get spread so much faster. If I as an investment banker have some insider information and I take a gamble, even if I think that it's going to do well, I'm still taking a risk. I'm still taking a risk that even with this information I have, this trade's going to pay off. Okay. And I could also tell, if it was legal, I could tell my family, I could tell my friends, they could tell people. But what the government's done with the regulations is they've put so many information barriers behind financial processes that information can't get released. Okay. And so the spread of information just completely stops, and that's where you have the opportunity for it. So it's like a paradox. It's like the laws themselves create the opportunity for insider trading. If there were no laws, the information would get spread, and it would arbitrage out. That's what you call it, is when there's no opportunity. There's no opportunity left to make money on it, because the information spreads so quickly, the price goes up. It bakes in that information, and it just goes to its value. So, I'm a free market guy. I think if you just eliminated all of the insider trading laws, it'd probably be overall better, but you would still have issues because like I said, the double-edged sword. Of, people with getting access to those trades and making money on it. So it's a tough one.
I see. I see. I mean, that actually really segues into the other question, which I was going to ask. I mean, So crypto, in the initial phases of it, had absolutely no regulation at all, right? And we saw how the market, acted, incredibly volatile.
Yeah.
But with time, now we're hearing of talks of regulation.
Yeah.
In the long term, I mean, obviously, from speaking with you, even now, I kind of know where you lean towards. But do you think overall the regulation is going to be good for crypto, or long term wise, maybe might not even be too good for crypto?
Yeah. So there's people on both sides that say, oh, the regulation for crypto is good because it's bringing it in the same ballpark as the big boys, right?
And
because,
then that'll bring in institutional investors and all this other.
Right. In the end, with crypto, I always go back to the same thing that I said at the start of this conversation, which is I view it as a tech platform. So whatever it's doing, it's going to be the most successful if it brings value. Where I see right now, the biggest potential is microtransactions.
Okay.
So if you can bring the transaction cost of a certain crypto down so much to where, like right now, if I want to buy something online, like let's say I want to buy one article from Wall Street Journal. I don't want a subscription. I just want to buy one article. When you open up things and it's like, oh, you don't have membership access.
Yep.
They could price that at $1, 50 cents if the transaction cost is so low, and I could buy that. I mean, there could be a lot of transactions happening at that micro level.
Right.
That's just one little thing, one little application, but there's many others too. I mean, like I said, Hedera Hashgraph doing ERP systems for companies. A lot of people talk about, what's the one, XRP for I think bank transactions.
Bank to bank, yeah.
Bank to bank. So, but regardless of what it is, what we're talking about is usefulness in terms of like basically a service or platform that is providing for other entities to increase their efficiency. So bank to bank, it's making those bank to bank transactions better. Bitcoin, it's bring a bunch of users together to be able to create a record of transaction and be able to be separate. But there's also things that can be built on top of Bitcoin.
Yes.
Ethereum, plenty of applications built on top of there. You can do smart contracts for actual things. If you're buying, I mean, this isn't happening now, but in the future, I think buying and selling a home, buying and selling stocks, whatever it is, probably more efficient on some kind of blockchain, right?
Yes.
So there's all kinds of applications, and I mentioned things happening now. These aren't related to gold, but it could be related to assets like gold. The Kinesis money partnering with the Indonesian government to create Sharia-compliant transactions with gold. Okay. And so there's all sorts of applications. And going to the regulation piece, I think it'll allow some of those implementations to be cleaner, right? Once the regulation's in place, then you know what it is, and they can actually start being legit and making money on it, right?
I see.
If the regulation's not in place, maybe it has a bad, maybe it creates uncertainty.
Yes.
If you're an enterprise trying to do a project, a blockchain project, and you don't know what the regulation is surrounding it, it creates a heightened risk.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think having the regulation in place could help. Not that regulation in and of itself is good, but just the fact that people know regulation exists and that the government will impose some kind of regulation. They just don't know what it is. So they have to wait around to see what comes up. So once the regulation's in place, it'll allow projects to move.
Floodgates of utility.
Exactly.
And all the new users coming in.
Exactly.
No, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. Actually, so let's actually wrap this up. The last question that I'm going to have for you would be, of all the topics that we've talked about today, starting from your decision to study investment banking and working and some of the topics, traveling, and now talking about investment in blockchains and comparison from blockchain to gold and all these, you said gas money, right? And then we talked a bit about politics as well, man, about how, manipulation in the government and reserve currencies and all that. So what takeaways, maybe one or two bullets about, what people watching this video, I mean,
Yeah.
because it's going to be a lot of youngins, you know, watching and looking to trade and looking to position themselves, you know, to do well or to take advantage of the next wave of opportunities.
Yeah.
Right? What advice do you have for them, and myself as well, man? You know, do you have for us all?
I think it's, you know, have an open mindset.
Okay.
You know, we've had many conversations about, you know, how you and Fred were in the trenches together, and
Yes,
you know,
sir.
I think, you know, when you have an open mindset, that's when you can explore new opportunities, right?
Okay.
If you're closed off, then you might not have access to some of those opportunities, and that relates to, you know, we talked about travel, we talked about you know, different countries in the world. Well, if you're closed off and have that normal mindset of, let's say just going to Western Europe, that's like the classic, but maybe you didn't even consider Middle East, Asia, or Africa,
Yes.
right? So there's opportunities like that where I think, you know, explore, be open-minded to exploring different areas of the world that aren't your normal place for Westerners to go visit. Open your mind to new ideas, blockchain, gold. You know, I think in this discussion, something that stood out to me is just, you know, yeah, the world's changing. The U.S. might be on the decline.
Yes.
And so, how can you, with that in mind, how can you best diversify and position yourself to be able to be, you know, if you're a U.S. citizen, keep that in mind. You do have some U.S. privilege right now.
Yes.
And as other areas of the world are coming up, Africa, Middle East, Asia, what can you do to get some exposure to those areas of the world, whether it's just traveling there, whether it's, you know, getting another passport, whether it's just seeing what's happening in those areas of the world. I think getting some of that exposure is beneficial.
Yeah.
You know, and so, yeah, I think just having an open mind and, you know, learning, right? Because if you're not learning, if you're not trying to progress yourself, you're staying stagnant.
Yeah.
And that's one theme in my life that I try to keep constant, is always progress towards something, whatever it is. So that would be the takeaway.
I see, man. And hey, man, thank you so much for coming and for giving us this wealth of wisdom, man. And hopefully, you know, next time I'm in LA or next time I'm back in Cali, man, we can sync back up and see, you know, how far we've come, and if we were indeed able to position ourselves to take advantage, man. So thank you again, John.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, sir. And that's a wrap.